Good morning, good afternoon, depending on what time of day it is, wherever you're at. My name is Doran. I'm the founder of Quantive. Today, we are talking about a rocky road to successful buy-side M&A. We're excited to have a couple of guests with us. We're going to go through this and talk about some of the learning points and experiences that they've had in their very successful journeys, getting from a initial founder point to where they're at today. So without further ado, I'm going to pass this over to my co-host and colleague here, Dean Nordlinger. Dean, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. Good morning. Glad to be here. I'm Dean Nordlinger, a partner with Rome in the Washington, D.C. office. And my focus is on business and corporate law, GovCon M&A, and been doing this for about 20 years, representing companies throughout their business life cycle, startup to exit, whether buy side or sell side. And we're delighted to have with us today a couple of individuals who I would say are both highly experienced in government contracting, well embedded in the GovCon ecosystem. They're founders, owners, and or executives whose roots are in small business government contracting. And they might not say this, but I'm going to say this. They successfully operated and grew their government contracting companies beyond small and traversed that chasm from small business to full and open territory. And with that said, I'd like Damon and Mehul, if you guys would take a minute to introduce yourselves and provide a little background to jumpstart this.
Okay, great. Mehul Sanghani, the CEO and founder of Octo. We are a mid-market government contractor focused on providing modernization services to the federal government.
Great.
And I'm Damon Griggs, the CEO of Dovel Technologies. I joined Dovel in 2016. Dovel is primarily focused on providing high-end advanced technologies and capabilities in the federal health and adjacent civilian markets. And I became CEO in 2019, and then we just recently sold to Guidehouse late last year.
Great, appreciate that. So just to put a little more context on this, to understate it, I think it's fair to say the past couple of years, in terms of the GovCon M&A market, things have been robust and dynamic, and both of you have participated in substantial and material ways, both on the buy side and sell side, and for that reason, we certainly want to get the benefit of your respective perspectives. And for that, Dan, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, sure thing. So, gentlemen, you've both managed to grow your enterprises significantly from, sort of a small area to mid-market and beyond through a mix of organic and inorganic growth. So the question that sort of comes to mind first is, how did you decide that an M&A strategy, a buy-side M&A strategy, might fit into where you were trying to drive the enterprise and your sort of that mid to long range plan? Mehul, why don't you dive in, and then we'll flip over back to Damon.
Sure. So a little bit of context on us, as you all alluded to, I think, we had our roots in, small business. I founded the firm in 2006. And, when I founded the firm, really wanted to establish a firm that was differentiated. Obviously this is a crowded space. Believe there's over 10,000 companies in, the government contracting market. And so, we really differentiated by focusing on differentiating with our technology, really looking at trying to be a provider of services that we felt were on the front end of demand aperture and where the market was going, and so at that time, words that are common in the vernacular in the marketplace now from a technology perspective, like agile software development and cloud, weren't really at the tip of the tongue, or certainly, at the front of the mindset of federal government customers. And so, for us, that was our niche. I think we were able not only to cultivate, a strong reputation doing some of those things, but also, as I noted, I think we saw a tidal wave of demand aperture for, some of those capabilities. And we were able to take advantage of that and see, significant growth over the course of the next decade plus. We leveraged that differentiation around those capabilities rather than a set of customers that we had intimacy with. Around those sets of capabilities, we leverage that differentiation, to build not just a brand reputation and identity, but to cultivate our own area of the marketplace and ride that to significant growth. In 2019, we really started to get significant interest in acquiring the firm, but we still felt the company had significant headroom to be able to grow. And rather than even though we had interest, rather than sell to a strategic acquirer, a larger publicly traded entity, for example, we decided to partner with Arlington Capital, established private entity in our marketplace, and one that I felt certainly had a significant reputation and credibility in terms of being able to take companies and allow them to grow to that sort of next inflection point of growth. And doing so, as your question, led in, doing so with a combination of investing in the things that we needed for organic growth, but also being able to add, inorganic, growth to the mix in the form of M&A. And so certainly prior to our partnership with Arlington, we looked at, being able to do acquisitions. I mean, I think that is something that, if you're fortunate enough to reach a certain size and scale in our market, it not only becomes attractive, it becomes a possibility just because you're able to attract financing that makes that a possibility. However, I think the one thing that I learned, and I think is true, is that even though you might have the debt capacity to do M&A, your credibility in being a credible buyer is predicated on your track record. And I think our partnership with Arlington, our partnership with the PE, not only lent a level of credibility to make us, obviously a viable buyer in the M&A space, but also allowed us access certainly, to capital in unique ways that made that more of a possibility. And so, for us, I think, that time period was important for us because, we were able to not only partner, with a private equity that had great reputation, but also have access to being a more credible buyer to make M&A a reality.
Awesome. And one follow-on question before we jump over to Damon: when you say more credible buyer, from a capital standpoint or from deal execution, like did you lean on them for execution help as well?
I'll be honest. I think there's no shortage of they're almost like real estate agents. There's no shortage of investment bankers in this market that will service founders, entrepreneurs, and cultivating exit strategies. But you look at it, I talked about the fact that there are 10,000 companies. Only 100 in government services, at least, probably about 150 companies at best, transact. And so I think again, like there's credibility in terms of being a viable buyer. I think when you look at those investment bankers, they're looking at companies that have successfully executed a transaction before, not can navigate the path not from LOI through due diligence into executing a deal, and that they know will be there at the end of the day and won't flake,
Awesome.
For lack of a better term. And so that credibility is important from an M&A perspective too.
Cool, thanks. Damon, let's jump over to you.
Sure. So, organic growth is always obviously the primary focus for, I would think, any company. It's the most cost-effective way to grow, and it obviously builds a lot more long-term value. But the M&A piece, the inorganic growth, is got to be critical for any small business. And I give full credit to Dov and Elma Levy, the co-founders of Dovel, and Paul Leslie, who was my predecessor, CEO at Dovel. They really, in 2011, Dovel was a $10 million women-owned small business, and they realized the need to grow quickly, and that you can't do it all organically to really build that long-term value. And reinvested a lot in the business and borrowed off of their own balance sheet to do some of their initial acquisitions, and that's what ultimately led to Dovel growing out of its small business status. When I joined at the beginning of 2016, Dovel was on a $70 million run rate, still had some legacy small business set-aside work, and I joined later that year, and it we were able to continue investing in M&A, making some really good acquisitions. It's really meant to be a catalyst for helping not only smaller companies get the scale they need to compete in a full and open market if they're going to go that route. It's really tough once you're over 35 million or whatever the NAICS codes you're in. You're immediately forced to compete against these multi-billion-dollar companies, and it's tough to do that with such small scale. It's also a great way to quickly access new customers that are difficult to penetrate otherwise, like NIH in our case. We acquired MSC in 2016. That's a really tough customer to get into on your own. It takes a lot of time to build credibility. And they have a small handful of trusted contractors, and MSC was one of them. And we were able to get in quickly into NIH, which has been really one of our anchor accounts, and we've continued to build on the franchise position that MSC has had there ever since. And it's also a great way to quickly acquire new technologies or capabilities as well. So we were very selective about it, but it was extremely successful. And we've done additional M&A activity since then. The first few acquisitions we were able to do off of our own balance sheet in 2019, similar to what Mehul said, we made the decision to go the PE route. We really had a lot of confidence in our own strategy and our leadership team and the capabilities and everything that we had. But it was, the next acquisition we were going to want to do, we were going to need to take some additional outside investment to make that happen. So we went with Macquarie Capital. They've been a tremendous partner to us, and similar to Arlington Capital, they really gave us all the investments that we needed to grow the business. For me to hire a leadership team that was really built to scale for future growth, and then we did the Ace Info acquisition later in 2019, which couldn't have gone better and couldn't have been more complementary in terms of capabilities and culture and some of the other key things that I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more later. Yeah. But obviously M&A, and then it got us to the point where we were on a $450 million run rate this year, when ultimately we in a hot market and in some ways a victim of our own success, we ended up selling to Guidehouse earlier or late in 21.
Congrats.
Great. So just listening to all that, both your respective inputs there. I'll come back to Mehul first, and then want Damon come back to you. But this is sort of a distillation of the things that we're just talking about. So let me restate it this way. So when you think both with respect to your companies before and after you had PE, partners with you, what do you guys think about are the key factors and ingredients that make for a successful buy-side acquisition as opposed to a flawed, if not failed one, when you think about it?
A number of different things. I think first and foremost, and I think this has a tendency to get glossed over, devil's in the details, but certainly cultural compatibility is a key element. Case in point, I think one of our very first acquisition that we completed, shortly after our partnership with Arlington was, with a technology-centric, IP-centric, almost a product, based technology company known as Connexa that, not only had access to customers that we also supported at the Air Force and NGA, but, had some significant IP and technology that was a core component of their mix and that was attractive to us as we looked to differentiate. And so, one of the biggest things that we looked at is not only was there not geographic proximity. I mean, this was a company that was largely headquartered in Phoenix, but, it was a company that, despite our roots in technology, had more of a product culture or product-centric technology culture, similar to maybe some of the companies in Silicon Valley than even we did. And so we really were, spent a lot of time not only examining the cultural synergy, but ensuring that, geographically, with it being displaced from where our center of gravity was in Metro DC, did the transaction, make sense? And I think what we found is a set of technologists, that really were passionate about some of the same things that we were. They shared, a passion for the missions that they served. They just happened to be in a different geography. Now, again, separately, I think one of the things that, we took note of, though, is that, and you'll see this, as you go through M&A, is that certain things, even though there's that cultural compatibility, that's a key, foundational element of what you look at in a transaction. There are certain things that are, what I will call cultural sacred cows, that are important to them that may not be exactly what we value. And so spending a lot of time, as much as you can up front, during diligence to better understand those cultural norms, those nuances, and what's important to the staff, that they be maintained, in any sort of transition is another important element. But lastly, I think as Damon alluded to, I think for us at least, we look to M&A again as a catalyst, as he put it, as a shot in the arm, but really to kind of double down on things that we felt were core elements of our thesis and strategy. As I noted, I think we really focused on differentiation around our technology. And so the M&A transactions we've been fortunate enough to do have really, not only filled those gaps, but doubled down, I would say, on some of the investments that we made. And then separately, we made acquisitions that allow us access to insular customers that ordinarily would be very difficult to penetrate credibly, as Damon pointed out too. And so we were able to do acquisitions that brought us, significant customer penetration in the Sevitech deal at DHS, which was an elusive customer for us, despite, some cycles on our side. And then separately, the VA, which is obviously, an amazing mission to be able to support, but is also, despite, its largesse in terms of its budget, is a difficult, account to penetrate for a myriad of reasons. So again, we look to those elements too. How does the M&A, in addition to the cultural compatibility, how does the M&A fit into being a catalyst for elements of strategy? The last thing I'll point out, in addition to culture and filling out elements of the thesis, is in other cases, we were looking for things that were adding, contract vehicles that enable us access. And vehicles in our market are effectively the table stakes that you need to be able to have access to certain customers. And so, getting access to vehicles like an Alliant 2, which we did not have, and here more recently, getting access to a T4NG, were important elements of at least our strategy and what we looked at when we evaluated M&A too.
Great. All right, Damon.
Yeah, and I'll try and do something that makes it, it's because I'm gonna hit on a lot of the same concepts that Mehul talked about, but I'll try and make it easier for your audience to remember, because I've kind of put it into the 5 C's model. So it really is, and we can use AceInfo as an example of that. So if you look at sort of the 5 C's that we consider for a successful M&A, it's capabilities, customers, contract vehicles, culture, and then cost. So those are all key factors that I think we need to look at. Capabilities in this case with AceInfo, they really complemented us. They gave us some additional areas in terms of cloud adoption, infrastructure optimization that we were looking to enhance some of the AI, ML, and digital modernization capabilities that we already had. It also gave us a lot more skilled technical expertise in terms of staff. The customer piece, in this case, AceInfo did not have as much in the federal health space, but they had some really great adjacent customers in the Fed Civ space that sort of played up and along with the same mission that we were focused on. A lot of the work we were doing, obviously, I talked about, is in the public health arena, but everything ultimately tied into supporting customers' missions that improve, protect, and save lives. And a lot of stuff that AceInfo is doing fit perfectly into that. The work that they do at NOAA, DHS, FEMA, TSA, others really fit that model, and EPA and some others that there were some nice adjacencies there. The third, contract vehicles. So Mehul talked about this as well. I mean, these days, if you don't have some best-in-class contract vehicles, full and open, that's your hunting license. That's, if you don't have some of those, then you're just going to be resigned to a sub position or some other things, and it's really difficult to compete these days without having those. And in addition, I mean, so Alliant 2 and Oasis were two full and open best-in-class contract vehicles that ASIMPO was able to bring to Dovel. Up to that point, we've been pretty much relying on CIOSP3 for the vast majority of our work, which we were I think we were number one in the small business category, other than small. And if we didn't have a CIOSP3 unrestricted at the time, but if we had, we would have been in the top 5. So we did very well in CIOSP3, but we needed other vehicles, and this really helped us there. And then culture. You can't. It sounds like a cliche, but you can't hit it hard enough. And Mehul did it as well. I mean, it's so important to have shared values and some of belief in our similar focus in terms of customer missions and how we support them, and that entrepreneurial spirit, that spirit of innovation. A lot of that really fit in nicely with the ASIMPO team, and it was so important, especially on the integration front, to make sure that those employees knew that this was really creating more opportunities for everyone. They're now able to take what they were doing on a larger platform, and it created more opportunities for them. This was not a cost takeout type scenario. This was really all about revenue synergies, and it could not have gone better. I mean, in the 2 years since we acquired ASIMPO, we grew organically 50%, 150 million, just organic growth. So it really is 1 + 1 equaling 3 or more by bringing a lot of those capabilities together. But the last part, cost, you do have to be disciplined. In any deal you do, you can't get caught up in the auction process and the need to win. You have to know kind of when to walk away if things get too spicy. And these days in this market, you have to be willing to pay up, but you got to know when to say when. So all those are key factors, and it certainly has helped us as we've gone through this process.
So Damon, picking up on your 5 C's and sort of that filter mechanism that you talked about, which is great. One of the things I wanted to talk through is focusing on or not focusing on shiny objects. So I'm sure both of you, as the company has grown, as the company's got bigger, you get more attention. You've got investment bankers like myself that are pitching deals at you all the time now, versus when you were yay big, not quite the level of focus that you might get right now. So you're sitting here, you're heading down a path. You've got a strategy that you're executing on, a growth plan that you're executing on, and somebody comes knocking on your door with the next greatest deal. How do you maintain the discipline of, let's not get distracted by the shiny object, or, how do you filter through that? Can you help us walk through that? And then I'll pose the same question back to Mehul.
Sure. Yeah. So we got pretty disciplined, especially after Macquarie got involved, because they have a good process in place. They have a lot of expertise in this area. And then I was also, as I mentioned, I was able to hire a great leadership team to come in, and that included bringing in John Brooks, who was our chief legal officer, but just as importantly, if not more so, he ran corporate development, and he had a similar role at Agility before that. So being dual-hatted really provided a great perspective, and he had a lot of good experience in the corp dev side of the house. So we would always track a list of proprietary targets that we would refresh quarterly. John was leading the charge on that. And then we would get feedback from our line leaders to ensure we're refreshing that list. Any partners that were kind of showing unique capabilities or strong growth that we thought might be good fits, we would put them in the list. And we'd always get feedback from our board, our external advisors, and Macquarie itself, and then discuss them at our board meetings and see which ones we really wanted to go after. And yeah, we got a lot of books. We probably only looked at about 10% of those, and we were very selective, because it, no matter how big or small a deal is, it usually takes the same amount of effort to go through that process. So we really wanted, if we were going to take the time and the effort from all the resources that we would need to go after something like that, we wanted to make sure it was a meaningful enough amount of business and impactful enough in all the different ways I just talked about to justify that time investment from so many key people.
Awesome. Thank you. Mehul, how about you? Any thoughts on this matter?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, very similar to what Damon articulated. I think, obviously he was, I think, has a tremendously talented team. He mentioned John Brooks. I think I was also fortunate post, our partnership with Arlington to attract a woman named Megan Gifford over, who leads up our corporate development and our strategy as well. Prior to joining us, oddly enough, or interestingly enough, I should say, she ran the buy-side diligence practice for Wolf Den, and she was involved and was hired by Arlington to diligence us. So, nice. Obviously fortunate to have her and her expertise. I think she brought a wealth of knowledge and insight and capabilities relative to having diligenced a number of other companies in our market for hire, and cultivated that experience there. And so we were fortunate to add, that acumen to the mix. But similarly, certainly, our partnership with Arlington brought us, a wealth of capability and experience. And I noted already the credibility there. And so similarly, we had an approach, working hand in glove with the leadership team with Arlington, where we collectively developed the draft board. And the draft board, what we started with certainly was our strategy and our thesis and where we wanted to go and what we wanted to be in terms of, where we wanted to go relative to the company over the next few years. But then where could we leverage M&A, as I noted before, as a catalyst for doing that, and built our draft board around that. The other thing that I'll note, in addition to just having that blocking and tackling, that discipline, that process, and then really having experience that we're both, I think, fortunate to have in terms of personnel that know and understand how, what assets not only fit that to strategy, what assets might have things lingering underneath rocks as you get into the diligence exercise that might pose potential challenges. I think, the other thing that, we really, focused on was, having a disciplined diligence approach, as part and parcel of what we executed. And I think that was an important element of what we really tried to do. Over time, what we did is build an overall M&A playbook, that we executed, not just to drive how we viewed, certain acquisition targets, but also drive how we wanted to handle integration. And I think for us, many of the things that we looked at, relative to that integration playbook, we were starting to look at prior to the acquisition closing, prior to really walking down the aisle, looking at, prior to us signing on the dotted line. And so, these are elements of discipline that, really allowed us, I think, to be successful with not only the lens at which we viewed, some of the acquisition opportunities, but being successful with bringing them into the fold and having, that nirvana that everybody wants, which is having 1 + 1 = 3, rather than 2. Having those synergies, associated with having these inorganic things be shots in the arm.
So, with all that said, I think that creates a natural segue and a shift over to this next question, which is, when you think about deal wisdom, there are a couple of things that you hear people, I'm sure you guys have lived this. 2 things. One is that, time is the enemy of all deals. And because time allows people to second guess and rethink what they're doing or why they want to do it. And we all know that, look, the legal stuff has to be, taken care of correctly. But in reality, what really makes deals succeed or fail are the people and the personalities who are in the middle of it. So I'd like to get both of your perspective on the deals you did or the deals you walked from, how this deal wisdom has played out in some of your buy side deals. And Damon will bring that to you first.
Sure, yeah, and I'll start with the most recent, and really it was just such a great model of success in so many different factors is the Ace Info acquisition in 2019. I mean, it really does again come back to culture and making sure that our leadership is aligned, our employees, their values and strategy and everything is aligned, and then on top of that, in our case, what made it so successful is embracing a lot of what Ace Info is bringing. So making sure there's a seat at the table for their leadership team, making sure that they understand how much we value their contributions in terms of technology, capabilities, the contract vehicles. That's really is a in a lot of ways, even though they were the ones being acquired, it was a merger of equals in many ways. Having a lot of empathy for the employees and putting ourselves in their shoes. And a lot of, I went around and did town halls to all the different Ace Info employee locations, and, West Virginia, Maryland, out in Colorado, and really spent a lot of time. And the presentation was all focused on, from an employee perspective, what's in it for me. And that's what they want to hear. They want to know their benefits aren't changing, or they're only getting better. Their salary and their comp is only going to get better, or at least at a minimum, it's not going to get worse. And that their job opportunities are now increasing exponentially. They're part of a bigger platform that values them. And so a lot of that was just so important, and it really led to, like I said, just that nirvana. I don't know if we'll use that word or a different one, but yeah, we got the 1 + 1 = 3, and it was really critical. And not every acquisition goes that smoothly. And I'm not saying, we've certainly had ones that were a lot rockier, and so I do think that, but the getting the people side of it right, and making sure that you're over communicating as often as possible, and making sure that there aren't surprises and that you're very transparent, has really been one of the key themes from my experience.
Great. All right, Mehul, how about you?
Yeah, no, Damon did a great job again. I think, obviously, we talked about the importance of people in this. We talked about the importance of culture. And, as Damon alluded to, I think, we spend a significant amount of time winning hearts and minds at the onset. But one of the things that, at least in our playbook that we've tried to do is, again, we try to win as much as we can, understand as much as we can, prior to walking down the aisle or signing on the dotted line for these deals. And so, one of the things that we've embraced doing, Damon mentioned some of the town halls, certainly we do that. But what we've also done is, prior to the town halls, we spend a good bit of time identifying, and to use a social media word, identifying people that are quote unquote influencers in the company. And ensuring that some of those people are influencers due to their, position within the company. And some of those people are influencers due to their tenure or due to the fact that folks just listen to their voice. And so, working with the leadership teams in that time period between perhaps closing and announcing and reading in that next layer of folks, we spent some time identifying those influencers and then reading them in before we conduct the town hall. Ensuring that we, not only make them feel like they're a part of that sort of special club, but really gauging from them, what, perhaps some of the early reactions are going to be, what the challenges are going to be, what people are going to care about. Certainly, folks have that Maslow view, which is, what's not only what's in it for them, but what, how do they maintain the things that they care about, the roof above their head, is their pay going to change, or are their benefits going to change? But we felt that having those influencer sessions prior to the broader town halls, really illuminated things that we should be mindful of, not just those sacred cows that I talked about, but things in our messaging that are important and critical to winning hearts and minds. And in some cases, we've tweaked our messaging going into those town halls to ensure that we hit on the key points that these influencers have highlighted and illuminated for us are going to be important, in the M&A. And so, again, to echo the sentiment, certainly people, the cultural compatibility, understanding what's important at both the individual and the leadership level, down to the individual belly buttons is exceedingly important, because people have, divergent needs. People have been read in at various levels, perhaps leading up to the transaction. In many cases, we've seen and dealt with the fact that people, have, at least have a perception of being treated disproportionately, in terms of how they're valued going into and after a transaction. So again, the more you can take on some of those conversations from a head-on perspective early in the dialogue, the more important it is. And so, we've been very fortunate, in, our, the deals that we've done to sort of execute, that playbook. And but each one, I will say, has been different in terms of the wants and needs and the things that are specific to the individual belly buttons, whether it be founders, things that are important to them, things that are important to their leadership, or at the staff level, what's important to them. And we've had to just sort of adjust the framework, the rubric, the model that we've executed to be more effective at winning hearts and minds with each acquisition that we've taken on.
Awesome.
Thank you. Dan, you want to?
Yes, I think looking at the clock, we've got about one more question here. We'll start with Mehul and finish up with Damon. So you're batting clean up, Damon. No pressure. So easy one for you guys, I think. Looking back, what might you have done differently with the benefit of hindsight? And what advice might you offer a founder that is starting this journey, considering an inorganic buy-side growth strategy?
So yeah, I'll start. Obviously, I think, I talked about winning hearts and minds. I think one of the things that we have from a mentality perspective, and this is something we inherited, due to Arlington influences, we sort of have the mantra of do no harm when it comes to these M&A acquisitions. Unlike, I think Arlington philosophically, Octo philosophically, we haven't gone into any of these acquisitions looking for cost synergies. We want everyone, even if there's duplication in roles, activities, a function, if it's HR, any of those things, everyone has, a seat on the bus in terms of where we're trying to go. And that is sort of the philosophy we think. We haven't looked at cost synergies to drive the value proposition that we look at some of the M&A activities that we've done. And so really looked at it from the perspective of growth. And so, in doing that, obviously, again, like we've been, specifically very, very careful with, how we've approached this. And as I noted, taken a do no harm approach, really approach these methodically, in many cases, slowly. Well, I think one of the things that I've learned is that, and especially in talking to some of the founders, they said, Mehul, you all were so careful not to, break certain elements and do things from a do no harm perspective. I think you almost in some cases went too slowly. I wish you had taken a faster cadence. I think, for example, in the case of, Connexto, we kept their brand, certainly had some cachet in the markets, both at the Air Force and NGA. We kept them, we kept the Connexto brand in place, I think, for about 6 to 8 months before we made that change. And, I think one of the founders pulled me aside and said, I wish you had kind of, we would have felt more like one Octo if you had sort of, painted the walls orange, and their colors are blue, painted the walls orange, maybe a month or two in. And so, I think these are small things. I talk about it from the perspective of paint, the email addresses, but I think in some cases you have to be willing, I think, and work directly with the founders. Certainly you want to be careful and do no harm, as we talked about, but in other cases, it certainly made sense to move in a more expeditious way. And I think that was something that we learned. That was our first acquisition there, Connexta. I think we adopted, much more of a touch and go attitude towards how the speed at which we approached integration, working carefully with, what we established was an integration management office with leadership from both firms as we approach integration, looking at things that we could accelerate and things that made sense to decelerate.
Awesome. Dan, back to you.
Yeah, so I'll weigh in. In terms of doing things differently, I feel like I don't have any regrets on any opportunities we passed on. I go back and forth, like Mehul said. Did we integrate too slowly or too quickly? It took us a while to integrate some of the brands. It was a little more complexity because Ace Info did cleared work, and with Macquarie we had foreign ownership, so we couldn't fully integrate some of that branding. But there's really, I don't have, there's really not much in hindsight that I would have done differently given the results, because they've been fantastic. But the second part of the question around advice to founders who are considering going and through this process, I would just again echo how important it is to be selective, follow the model with the 5 C's as much as you can, know when to walk away, and really make sure that you're thinking about what are your priorities, your deal breakers, what are the things that really are important to you, so that and I like what Mehul said. Think about what you want your organization to look like and make sure you're working backwards from there, so that'll be a great way to filter out a lot of the noise.
Awesome.
That's great. When I listen to all that, I always think it's helpful. What kind of distillation, what kind of takeaway can we grab from all this? And just listening to you both, I would say that there's an intentionality and a discipline that has to really be the undergirding of your strategy. When you go forward, and seems to have served you both very well. So I think that kind of brings us to the end of the road of the session, and want to again collectively thank you both for your time. Wish you well in 2022. I'm sure the market will be ripe and robust, and you guys are, I'm sure, already sizing up a number of things. So we'll be interested and curious to see what happens with your respective companies and platforms heading into 2022.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, gentlemen. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Okay.